Welcome to the Sound of Movement podcast. Today we're continuing our discussion about becoming a better athlete. And today's topic is all about mastering the fundamental movement patterns. Something that we see very often with new members is that people have gone too far down the complexity path, trying to get too advanced too soon. What's up, everyone? It's time to rock. If you're new to the tribe, Rich is behind the mix, Phil's at the table with me. My name is Rad Burmeister, and we are Unity Gym, experts at turning driven people into athletes. Today's episode is brought to you by the Unify Movement System, the only online program effectively balancing strength, flexibility, and fitness so you can unleash your inner athlete. You can get daily coaching by us, plus our epic Foundations Prep program and revolutionary structural balance blueprint to create your ideal program and optimize your performance. As a valued listener, use the link in the description to get your first month free. I'm very excited to announce that this Friday we're going to be having an epic 72-hour flash sale where our Flexibility Masterclass is going to be on sale at a huge discount. You're going to be able to choose if you want to get phase 1, phase 2, or phase 3, or all of them for a huge discount. It is an amazing program balancing strength and flexibility, teaching advanced flexibility methods like end range strength, loaded flexibility, loaded eccentrics, a lot of really cool stuff. Now, before we get started, warm welcome if you're on the live stream in the UMS Movement Mastermind Facebook group. Leave a comment and we'll send you some love. Remember that anyone can join and interact. And lastly, a shout out to our YouTube athletes catching the replay. Hit the like button and support the channel. And subscribe, of course, if you like what you see. Okay, so joining us today is Phil White from ADPT Physio. How are you today, Phil?
Mate, I'm just feeling so good.
Mm-hmm.
I've got back into consistent running and I've started cycling to work every day, running at least 3 times a week. And I did a sprint session last night that gave me just the most amazing sort of runner's high afterwards, where it was like a 200 meter uphill sprint followed by a 600 meter recovery. And it just... feels good.
Yeah.
I just feel like a different human after spending a bit of time not doing so much fitness. So yeah.
Yeah, well, it sounds like you're getting ready for our challenge next week, Phil.
Yeah, let's talk of a fitness challenge, but
we'll see how we go.
Yeah, that's another discussion, but we'll take that one offline.
Yeah.
How you doing, Rad?
Yeah, I'm doing really well. This is a topic that means a lot to me because I was the person that I'm going to be making fun of here a few years ago. I was the person that really tried to progress too fast, too soon, and I learned the hard way the importance of having a really good coach. You need somebody who can guide you and let you know when you're ready to progress and what you really need to be focusing on. And if I wish I had have known this, I wish I had have known the importance of just becoming really strong in the fundamental movements. And it's funny because even looking at some of those videos that we looked at of my training from several years ago, my technique was just terrible. I've come so far in a short amount of time. And it's because of that, going back to the basics and just mastering them, that really, really has set me up for success going forward.
Yeah, absolutely. It's having a good coach, as we talked about yesterday, is one key part of this. And also, as if you've listened back to plenty of the episodes, there's been, especially Yanni talking about mindset and goals and really having a clear, idea in mind why you are training. And I think having the combination of those two is just golden for getting directed on the right sort of path, because often, you can just, if you're taking the training approach without a coach and maybe without really thinking too hard about it, you get bored quite quickly and then just search for novelty and search for the next shiny, new, exciting, movement that you see on Instagram or whatever. And if that's the only reason, if that's kind of the main driving force behind your exercise selection, then you are probably going to have really unsatisfying training experience, because you just try and push a bit too quickly, potentially injure yourself, as we talked about with sort of training load issues last week, and then just go back on this cycle. So
and
I think that's really common.
Yeah, it is, man. So common. And it is, what you said there is really important. You have to be clear on why you're doing this. Why are you going down this training journey? Because if it is, there's a really good concept from a book that I'm pretty sure you've read as well, the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which is the concept is start with the end in mind. So when you start something, have the end in mind. Why am I starting this? What am I hoping to achieve out of it? And when you do that, it allows you to plan better for what it is you want to do. And if you don't really have an end goal, if it's all just about getting fit, you know, and feeling good within your body, losing weight, you know, aging better, all of that stuff, then you absolutely should be just focusing on the fundamental movements. Like, what's even the point of trying to do more advanced stuff if all you're doing is just trying to feel better within your body? And then on the flip side, if you're thinking, somebody like me who's thinking, I want to, you know, master these calisthenic skills and these movement things, well, then you absolutely should be mastering the fundamental movements as well, because if you don't and you try and progress too quickly, you're going to do what I did and injure yourself. And that's what you deal with a lot, isn't it, Phil? You deal with people that have just progressed a little bit too quickly. And
yeah, it's just the most common reason for patients to come in. I don't see too many people who at the moment, because most of the people who I work with are coming through the gym or with people I work with online in the Unity community. It's you know, getting stuck into training, and it's not necessarily like your kind of classic sports ligament injuries, no like ACLs and MCLs or those kind of ankle sprains or whatever. Like most of the people I work with, it's just a training load error where they've gone for something that their body's not quite ready for. They've gone a bit too hard, a bit too early, and or a whole lot too early. And aren't respecting the kind of the times in which it takes for your body to adapt to things, and not quite having the requisite strength, and not really understanding how small changes in exercise selection can have really quite drastic impacts on the load you're putting through your body. So and it's why I love coming on and talking about this stuff, because it's all the things that I got wrong when I first started training, when I was playing elite sport, and you know, back in the day for fitness training, strength and conditioning. For ultimate frisbee was running 5Ks 3 times a week as fast as you can, and you know, doing like planks for as long as you can, and that was about it. And then you're getting onto the field and expected to like do all these crazy movements, jumping really high, changing direction, all of these things, and your body's just not ready for it. And yeah, it's just such a common thing to not really understand like the fundamental big most important movements to be training, and then how you can progress them in a relevant way towards your like sport specific goals. But most people just either go down the rabbit hole with one thing too hard too early, or just have no concept of this whatsoever. Yeah,
absolutely. And I often think, I wonder what our bodies and our training would look like if we had have known this stuff when we were younger. Yeah,
I'd have a whole lot less MRIs and X-rays in my closet at home. That's for sure.
That's it. So let's talk about what we mean by the fundamental movements. What are we referring to by the fundamental movements, Phil?
Well, I think in Unity, if you've done any of the UMS training before, you'd notice that each of the weekdays is set up to have a very consistent workout. You go to some gyms where it's every day it feels like they just roll the dice, and you know, you do whatever is like the fresh flavor of the month exercise,
flavor of the day, right?
Flavor of the day, and you might even be doing like full body workouts day after day. But with Unity, it's very much a specific like exercise per day, and that breaks down into these fundamental movements. So and for those who maybe aren't so aware, we've got vertical push pull Monday, a squat, and then paired with a calf on Tuesday. Wednesday there's a bit of a either straight arm strength for your upper body, or lower body is going to be more our hip prep stuff for athletic development. Then horizontal push pull for Thursday, and a deadlift pattern with external rotation on Friday. And so the reason why we call these fundamental movements is if you tick off all those boxes, then you're basically preparing your body for most human movement. So running, jumping, climbing, pushing, pulling, like all of these big ticket movements are covered.
As far as the major muscle groups in the body go, it doesn't leave anything unturned, down to the point where recently, maybe 6 months ago or so, you looked at our program and pointed out to us that we didn't have any calf raises in there, which meant that we weren't actually doing anything for a fundamental movement, which is, you know, dorsiflexion, you know, like that
plantar flexion.
Plantar flexion. Whoops, sorry.
So
we really are leaving no stone unturned for the big movements, the big muscle groups.
And so for those who are like, looking at that, they think like, oh, okay, like a squat versus like a calf raise doesn't really feel like it sort of is worthy of that position. But when you think about all the movements done and what you need for athletic development, the calves are massive in running, massive in, walking upstairs, jumping, and they are actually a really key part of knee stability as well. The muscles that cross your knee are really important for the stability of the system. And that's what it all kind of comes down to, is this idea of joint systems and body systems, and how do we basically train them in the most balanced way that they're prepared for anything. So,
and if you're looking at our program and the way that all of the other movements really cover almost every joint movement in every other joint, but if that's not being covered, then there's one major part of the body that just isn't getting trained at all. So since we put those calves in there, it's really become a lot more rounded, isn't it?
Yeah, it's ticking all the boxes.
Yeah. And so the idea being that these fundamental movements, like a deadlift, for example, for some people, if you haven't really learned how to do a deadlift properly, it can take months and months and months to really dial that technique in, to get to the point where us as coaches walk past and have nothing to say. Just say, good on you. That looks really good. Let's try and put a bit more weight on the bar next week, and get stronger. It can take people a while to do that, because if you don't have good movement terminology, and what I mean by that is if your brain can't comprehend movement well, if you can't look at an instruction for how to do a movement and replicate that, quite quickly, then it can take a lot of time. And that comes from, in my opinion, decades of time moving. Like, the reason why, everyone in this room here, Phil, Richard and me, have all got good movement terminology is because we've been doing some form of movement for probably our whole lives, right? Like, I mean, if you, right through your 20s, were playing Frisbee, I'm guessing that through your teenage years you were doing something physical.
Oh, yeah. I started playing internationally at 15. So.
Yeah, well, there you go. I mean, personally for me, I grew up in the bush. I was running, jumping, riding bikes right through until high school. And then in high school, I got right into rollerblading and martial arts. And then that went on to being in the army as an infantry soldier, and that went on to, getting into calisthenics and movement training. So there's never been a period of my life where I haven't been moving and learning from other people on how to move. Similar story with Richard. He started as a teenager. And so that gets your brain and your body hardwired for movement in a way that's very, very different for somebody that, if your experience is, oh, well, I really haven't done any exercise for a decade and I've decided to come to the gym now. If that's you, then that time that it takes to master the fundamental movements is definitely going to be longer than somebody else who would be in the boat of any of us three, but who comes to the gym and says, oh, hey, I've never learned the UMS, or I've never learned weightlifting, but I've been doing X, Y, and Z. And you just have to respect that process, right?
Yeah, and I think, part of it is, like, there are plenty of people who've been training in the gym for years who I look at and I think, you have a lot of work to do, and probably even more work than some people who are a bit more fresh, because they've got such ingrained sort of movement patterns. And so I do think that, it really does come down to intention behind what you're doing and good coaching. And I think there's plenty of people who've been training in the gym for a long time who just get it quite wrong.
Yeah. We had a member here a while ago, one of our female members, and when she joined, she was a total beginner. She was really unconfident, didn't believe in herself, and through a very short amount of time, relatively like a year, she turned into one of our female members that a lot of the other women in the gym really looked up to. She was banging out sets of 3 or 4 bodyweight pull-ups and doing respectable numbers on squats and deadlifts and bench press and things like that. And one day she said to me, oh, my brother's in town and, he's been training for years and years and years, and he wants to come and do a training session with me. Is that okay? And I said, yeah, for sure, it's fine. And he came in and they trained together, and they were doing a deadlift session. It was on Friday. And to look at him, his physique, you could tell he'd been training for a long time. He was a really fit-looking, muscular dude. And he was giving her pointers on the deadlift. And that was so bad. His technique was woeful. And I just watched. I didn't say anything. And then the next day I came up to her and I said, how'd you go with your brother? Oh, yeah, it was good. It was interesting. I learned a bit. And I said, forget everything you learned. You should have been teaching him how to deadlift. I'm telling you now. It's really funny.
And technique's a really interesting one, because there has been a bit of a debate in like physio and the rehab space about like the importance of technique and how, you know, sometimes you can go almost a bit too far in saying like this is how human movement should be, and anything outside of that is really problematic. And I think in the UMS and the indie gym kind of culture, there's lots of movement variability where you're doing things that do take your body outside of what would, you know, classically be considered, you know, safe movement. Like the test of water, for example, is quite a challenging thing for your hips and knees. And, you know, if you did a squat in those positions or loaded up that movement, like that could be something that would otherwise be, you
problematic,
know, bit problematic. But I think the thing with technique is when it comes to lifting heavy loads, every sort of technique cue is a safeguard for basically staying safe in that. So if you're doing fairly submaximal loads, like there's probably less, you know, like there's less need for really pedantic technique. You'll probably be fine. That's how most, you know, like F45 and lots of other Barry's Boot Camp, all those gyms who they get people banging out crazy amounts of reps on lots of different, what would look like fundamental movements, what would be, you know, fairly complex movements, but they do it in such a submaximal way that like technique doesn't play, like it's not going to be a make or break sort of thing. But when you do want to push your strength and you do want to really develop, you know, great strength that carries over, that's where technique does become really important. And yeah, I think it's just a really key thing for people to wrap their head around is when you're starting out is to learn this stuff really well, because if you got to treat each of your submaximal sets and each as you're learning as a rehearsal for when you're going to be you know, pushing your strength and lifting heavy. So that's why like in that big argument that's happening in that space, like I do really think that there is a important role for it, but just yeah, I would encourage people who are getting stuck into their strength training and you know, calisthenics and flexibility, like just treat each of your sessions as if you're practicing for when you're doing a heavyweight. I
think one of the biggest things that lack in people's training is quality of movement. And it's something that gets drilled into my head by my coach all the time. It's the quality is the only thing that really matters. And you can see when you see the results that are produced from coaches that have really drilled this in and they've found a way to connect with their tribe and get them to understand that this quality is really, really important. When you look at the more advanced students, they're a cut above. You know, they really are able to produce results that other people can't. And if you go the other way, which is like oh yeah, that's good enough, let's go to the next movement, there is a glass ceiling that people hit, and there's a certain point where you just can't really go beyond it without looking like a sack of shit when you're lifting and when you're doing things, you know, like when you load up somebody on a barbell back squat that hasn't got that fundamental movement pattern right, you know, the elbows start coming forward and the back starts rounding and everything, and it just starts like, you just sort of cringe as a coach, right? You look at it and you're just thinking about all the damage that they're doing and, you know, the risk versus reward on that. Whereas when you see somebody that's really nailed that fundamentals, when they fail a rep, their body looks good, but they stop moving and then they just dump the barbell and get out of the way. It's a really different, you know, two scenarios there. Yeah. And one of them is quite safe. Most people can, you know, I've pushed myself to that point of failure and failed several times with weights and been pretty okay. And I've seen other people fail so horribly. Like I've seen people fail under a squat where the bar looked like it almost crushed them, like they rounded their back and then the bar pushed them forward and, you know, they fell onto the ground. And same thing with deadlifts, right? Like where you see people deadlift and they lose their technique and it just all goes to crap.
Yeah, or the bench press when it just gives away and lands on it. It's scary stuff.
It's
and
horrible.
It doesn't happen in this gym, fortunately, because we have really strict sort of, you know, about how many reps in the tank you want to have and people are pretty good with their technique here, but it's in some,
for sure.
Some horrible stuff.
So if you haven't, sorry.
I was just going to say, so that's like a really, you know, a good sort of look into the, you know, why like you should master the technique of fundamentals. But I think just going back to that programming side of like why, you know, you would be looking at building these fundamentals, we sort of brushed over it, but you can just see so many programs out there where people sort of string together a bunch of different exercises that, you know, look like it's sort of covering a bunch of like a fair spread of the body. But if they're doing, like the classic one is the when people like the bodybuilder style, like you're back and buys sort of exercise where they just really nail down on one side of the system, so basically like just the pull side of the system and neglect the push, or basically just not quite achieving a balance throughout the week of balancing the system. Like that's where things can really start to not work towards becoming a better athlete, because when becoming a better athlete, we really want to make sure that we're getting all the systems are strong and balanced, and that's going to lead you to be not only good performance but also resilient to injury. And obviously there's going to be when you have got all these fundamentals in place, that's when you can start adding in some sport specific sort of work on top of that. And obviously you can choose rep ranges and contraction speeds and exercise selection within those fundamental movements to be a bit more sport specific. But yeah, it's just if you totally neglect some area of the system, that's where things can really go wrong. And
it's actually funny that you say that, because what Phil, for those of you that don't understand, what Phil's just described there are different what's called program splits, where a program split is where from Monday to Friday, or sometimes some program splits are even over 2 weeks or longer, but usually it's over a 1 to 2 week period, and where you say, okay, Monday it's chest and back day, Tuesday it's quads and hamstrings day, Wednesday it's rest, Thursday it's XYZ. And what Phil just described there is a very typical way of for bodybuilders to do it, because in bodybuilding it's all about smashing the muscles and getting a lot of volume on it to cause hypertrophy, to cause the muscles to grow. It's funny hearing you say that, because I've done program splits like that a lot before, but when we made the decision to set our program split for the UMS, and when we were talking about this balance and opposing muscle groups, opposing movements, all of this stuff, and it works so well that we haven't changed that split for quite a long time now. And it does so many good things, because people know what they're in for, so that when you go away, if you've been doing the UMS for several months and you've been paying attention, you can go away and replicate the workouts anywhere. Even if you don't have access to a gym, you can just do push-ups and a ring row, or you can find anything that you can kind of pull your own body weight on, as long as you're doing some kind of a pulling movement, and you do that with a push-up. You can do your push-pull days, and it works really, really well. We have people that come here that talk about how within a month, like they feel like aches and pains that they've had in their shoulders and things have just gone away, just from working on the fundamental movements and the balance between push and pull and opposing muscle groups.
Yeah, and I think the last thing to really cover this before we wrap it up is about with progression, because becoming a better athlete is all about progression and getting to a high level of performance and where you want to get to. And I think this is where you've in the past really changed your thinking about how you you've approached your training, and you went down the calisthenics route and did that really hard, and kind of ran into a bit of a, like, you kind of seemed to stop progressing after a while, and then have decided to come back and work on building this like strength within the fundamental movements to get past those barriers. And it's just, I think a good example of was, when Bass was here, who's a very strong dude, was able to just like crack out a dragon flag just because he's got like very strong balanced shoulders, a very strong trunk and legs from doing so many squats and deadlifts, and was able to do what is like an exceptionally advanced calisthenics movement because of his fundamental strength within those key systems of the body. And so he's a very extreme example of that, obviously, but it's sort of this idea that it's very hard to progress complex movements or calisthenics movements, and we have ways of obviously facilitating that, but it's by like constantly building up your strength in these fundamental movements, you'll get gains in any other part of your training journey, because they are training the system in a healthy, balanced way.
Yeah, absolutely. It was something that stifled my progress, that's for sure. And I have found just so much value in mastering these fundamental movements, and really seeing some significant improvement in my body's capabilities from doing that. So, yeah. Well, team, I hope you enjoyed that. Tomorrow, are you here tomorrow, Phil?
Yeah, I'll be around.
Tomorrow we are going to talk about progressing from fundamental movements, and the way that we get such amazing results with our UMS online coaching program through keeping it simple and strategic with the way that we progress and regress. And I think, again, that's going to be a really good conversation to have Phil on the show for, because he can give a lot of really good insight into what intelligent progression and regression looks like, which is, in his own words, one of the reasons why he really likes the UMS. Before we go, just a quick shout out to Vinny Brown and Stephen Pellegrino for commenting on the live stream. Vinny's saying, "Hi guys, the show is on a little late for me here in the US. Got to get to bed on time for best recovery." Absolutely. And he's saying, just checking in to say hi. Thanks for tuning in, Vinny. And Stephen Pellegrino is saying, "I just have day 1 to day 6 and repeat. I take off when needed." Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, I think one of the things that I really value about the UMS and about our training split is the way that, and you've said this a lot, the way that you don't have to think about it. You can think about, okay, what do I want to focus on this month? And then you just slot it into the UMS. Whereas when you don't have a blueprint like what we've got, God, there's so much thought that has to go in. And eventually for a lot of people, the thought goes out the window and they end up just doing random workouts where, like, I remember when Yanni especially, I don't know about Richard. I think Richard's always been pretty planned. But I remember Yanni used to be sitting out there for 10 minutes and you say, "What are you doing, man?" And he'd go, "I'm just trying to think of what I'm going to do today." That was before the UMS. And now we don't have to do that anymore. We just walk out on the gym floor and, it's Wednesday. It's this day. Yeah,
it's infinitely variable, but so simple that you always have some guidance. So,
So thanks for tuning in, everyone, and we will see you again tomorrow for another cracking show. Now, if you liked what you see and you're watching the replay on YouTube, please subscribe to our channel. And if you're listening to the podcast, share it with your friends and also subscribe. We'll see you soon, guys. Have a great day.
Health is about performance, not just body image.
You better be willing to accept what you're going to have to do to get there.
We'll start focusing on movement goals, strength goals, flexibility goals.
When you nail that skill, it's there forever.
The body image goal doesn't get you that far.
It's the consistency and frequency that's going to get you there. It's not the intensity.
There's no shortcuts to mastery and movement. Destination doesn't change overnight, but your direction will.
The gym is not the place to beat up the body that you hate. It's the place to build the body that you love.
We are the gym that teaches people how to move instead of just exercise, because we believe that health is about performance, not just body image.